The planet Arkan was once a beautiful world full of life, music, and art. Its people, the Arkan, were known for their gentle nature and creative minds. They built floating cities that shone under twin suns, painted skies with shimmering lights during festivals, and believed that peace was the greatest strength any race could have. For hundreds of years they had lived in harmony, protected under the promises of the Galactic Union. They were assured that if danger ever came, their allies would stand by them. The Arkan trusted those promises with all their hearts, but peace can end quietly, like a candle being snuffed out in the dark. One ordinary morning before dawn, the skies of Arkan filled with lights, not the soft colors of festivals, but sharp flashes of fire. The Krell Dominion had arrived. Massive warships darkened the horizon, blocking the suns. Their engines rumbled like thunder. At first, the Arkan didn't understand what was happening. They had never seen war up close. Children stood on balconies watching the strange ships descend, their eyes wide with curiosity. Then the first beam of plasma tore through a city tower and everything changed. The attack was merciless. Within hours, the Krell soldiers landed in thousands, armored and ruthless. They destroyed communication hubs, power plants, and water systems. They didn't come to conquer politely, they came to erase. The Arkan soldiers, few in number and untrained for real battle, tried to resist. Their weapons were outdated, designed for defense drills, not real war. The Krell swept through them easily. Entire districts fell in a day. Screams filled the air where laughter once lived. The blue skies of Arkan turned red with fire and smoke. Inside the capital city, Elder Soren, one of the last members of the High Council, stood before the main control tower. He was old, with silver marks of age running across his skin. His hands trembled as he sent out the distress call to the Galactic Union. His voice cracked as he spoke, begging for help, reminding them of the treaties and promises that had been signed long ago. "We are under attack," he said, his voice shaking. "Our cities are falling. Please, anyone who can hear this, help us." Then he pressed send and waited. At first, everyone believed the Union would respond quickly. The Arkan had supported them for years, sending art, resources, and technology to the Central Worlds. Surely their friends wouldn't abandon them now. But as minutes turned to hours, no message came back. The signal went out again and again. Still silence. No ships appeared in the sky, no fleets on the scanners. The Arkan gathered in shelters, listening to the constant static of the communication speakers, hoping for a reply that never came. Outside, the Krell continued to destroy everything. Their machines crushed gardens, burned libraries, and filled rivers with ash. They had no mercy for the weak. Families were separated, and small groups of survivors fled underground to old transport tunnels. Food grew scarce, and air filters began to fail. In one corner of the tunnels, a young mother tried to keep her child calm by humming an old Arkan lullaby. The sound echoed faintly through the dark, a tiny reminder of what the world used to be. Days turned into weeks. The distress calls still went unanswered. The few surviving soldiers blamed themselves. Some blamed the Union. Others simply sat in silence, staring at the cracked walls of the shelter, too tired to speak. Elder Soren continued to send messages, his voice growing weaker each day. "We are still here," he said into the transmitter. "Still waiting for our friends." But the console blinked the same message over and over, no response. Up on the surface, the once golden towers of the capital lay broken. The Krell had turned the planet into a symbol of their power. They wanted the galaxy to see what happened to those who could not defend themselves. They left Arkan cities burning, broadcasting the destruction to nearby systems as a warning. To them, this was victory. To the Arkan, it was the end of everything they knew. In one of the shelters, Elder Soren looked around at the remaining survivors. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow from fear and hunger. He tried to smile, but it came out as a weak tremor. "We must not lose hope," he whispered. But deep down he knew hope was slipping away. He had seen entire generations wiped out in days. He had seen children grow silent from hunger. He had seen the stars above their planet turn red, as if even the heavens had turned against them. Still, every morning, Soren walked to the broken communication terminal and tried again. "To the Galactic Union," he would say softly, "we are under siege. We need your help." Then he would wait in silence. The static sound became his only companion. Once he thought he heard a faint voice, but it was only interference. One night, as he sat near the transmitter, a young soldier approached him. "Elder," the soldier said quietly, Maybe they cannot hear us anymore, maybe. Maybe we have been forgotten? The old man looked at the boy, his tired eyes reflecting the dim light. No, Soren replied after a moment. The Union made promises. They will come. They must. But his voice lacked its old strength. Outside, the wind howled across the ruined cities. Fires burned slowly, eating what was left of the Arkan's art and history. The Krell ship still hung above the planet, watching, ensuring no one could escape. From orbit, Arkan looked wounded, scarred with blackened spots and glowing craters. It was a sight that would have broken any heart. On the 30th day after the invasion, Soren stood alone on the surface near the remains of the communication tower. His robe was torn, his hands covered in dust. He looked up at the night sky, at the stars where his allies were supposed to be. You promised, he whispered. You said we would never be alone. His voice was carried away by the cold wind. Around him, only silence answered. And yet, somewhere in the darkness of the universe, his message kept traveling. A faint signal bouncing between dead satellites, drifting across unknown regions. The Arkan didn't know if anyone was listening anymore. Most had given up. But Soren in his heart refused to stop trying. Even as the Krell hunted the last survivors, even as the cities fell completely silent, he believed that someone out there, anyone, would hear them. The planet lay dying. The Union's fleets never came. The stars above seemed indifferent. But somewhere far beyond the edge of the known sectors, a small listening post, long forgotten by most, picked up the last faint echo of the Arkan distress call. A human technician looked at his console in surprise, reading the translation. Help us. They are killing us. He frowned, replayed the message, and called for his superior officer. No one in the Terran fleet had heard of Arkan before, but something about the message stirred them deeply. Back on Arkan, Soren sat by the shattered console, his eyes half closed. Maybe tomorrow, he murmured to himself. Maybe they will answer tomorrow. Above him, the stars shimmered faintly, silent witnesses to a world on the edge of extinction. The night was cold, the air thin, but Soren didn't stop looking upward. He couldn't see it yet, but far away a small blue planet had just begun to stir. The Arkan didn't know it, but their call for help was about to reach the one species in the galaxy that never ignored a cry for mercy. The ones who didn't belong to the Union, who didn't follow the rules of hesitation and politics, the ones who came from a world that had taught them to survive anything, the ones who called themselves humans, and while the Arkan huddled in the darkness, waiting for an answer that seemed impossible, far beyond their ruined world, the first Terran signal began to move through the stars. The promise of help was on its way, but the Arkan, trapped in their despair, couldn't know that yet. For now they only had silence. And the silence felt endless. Far away from the burning world of Arkan, the Galactic Union continued its routine meetings in massive shining halls, filled with delegates from hundreds of alien races. They spoke in calm voices, discussed trade routes, political alliances, and energy treaties. When the report about Arkan's invasion arrived, it was treated like a minor disturbance, just another incident among thousands of star systems. Some officials read the report, nodded, and set it aside. Others said they needed to study the matter before taking action. In truth, none of them wanted to get involved in a war against the Krell Dominion. The Krell were powerful, cruel, and dangerous. Fighting them meant risking fleets and losing political influence. And so, Arkan's name was mentioned less and less each day until it became just another line in a long list of pending issues. The Arkan, hidden in the underground tunnels of their dying planet, had no idea that their cries for help had been quietly ignored. They kept sending messages begging anyone to listen, but no ships came. The only sounds above the surface were the constant hum of Krell machines and the crackling of fire that never stopped. The survivors were now living like shadows beneath the ground. The once bright and proud race had become silent, their beautiful songs replaced with the dull echo of fear. Elder Soren still tried to keep everyone's spirit alive. Each morning he would walk through the dim tunnels, speaking softly to the survivors, telling them stories from Arkan's golden past, stories about hope, courage, and friendship. But even his voice was beginning to sound tired. The people had grown thin and pale. The air filters barely worked, and the recycled water tasted like rust. Food was almost gone. The children no longer laughed. They just sat quietly beside their parents, staring into the dark. Above ground, the Krell continued their cruel campaign. They built camps, extracted minerals, and tested new weapons on the empty cities. The once beautiful floating gardens were reduced to piles of broken metal. The Krell broadcasted their victory across nearby systems, boasting that no one dared challenge them. Their commanders laughed when they saw no Union ships coming to rescue the Archon. To them, this was proof that mercy was weakness. Meanwhile, in the grand chambers of the Galactic Union, debates dragged on endlessly. Some representatives argued that the Archon should be helped. Others said that intervening could lead to a full-scale war. "We cannot risk everything for one small planet," one delegate said. "Our duty is to protect the greater peace." But what they called peace was really fear of the Krell's power. The votes were counted, and the final decision was to monitor the situation instead of acting. The meeting ended, and the galaxy turned its attention elsewhere. Archon was forgotten. Back on the planet, the silence became unbearable. Every night, the survivors would gather in the main bunker and listen to the communication system, hoping for even a single reply. The static sound filled the air like an endless storm. "Maybe they're on the way," some would whisper. "Maybe the message just needs more time." But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The Union wasn't coming. They had been left to die. One evening, as Elder Soren sat alone near the flickering transmitter, a faint vibration ran through the floor. At first, he thought it was another Krell bombardment. But then the noise stopped, replaced by a strange rhythmic pulse from the console. He looked up sharply. The communication screen flickered. For a moment, there was nothing but distortion. Then a voice broke through. It was deep, strong, and completely unfamiliar. "This is the Terran Expeditionary Fleet," the voice said. The accent was harsh, the tone commanding. "We received your distress signal." The survivors froze. The word Terran meant nothing to them. They had never heard of such a species. Elder Soren leaned closer, unsure if this was real or a cruel trick. Who are you?" he asked quietly. The voice on the other end replied after a short pause. "We are humans," it said. "We heard your call. We're coming for you." For a long moment, no one in the bunker spoke. The message replayed again automatically. "We're coming for you." The words felt strange, powerful, almost unreal. After weeks of hopeless silence, this was the first sign that someone, anyone, had listened. Some of the survivors began to cry softly. Others looked at each other in disbelief. Could it really be true? Soren's heart pounded as he tried to replay the signal, but it had already cut off. There was no visual feed, no coordinates, only that single transmission. He looked around the room and saw the flicker of hope returning to the eyes of his people. "They heard us," he whispered, barely able to believe it himself. "Someone heard us." The message spread quickly through the underground shelters. "Someone is coming," the people said. "Help is coming." For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel so heavy. Mothers hugged their children. The soldiers checked their weapons, standing a little taller. Even the wounded smiled faintly, dreaming that maybe, just maybe, they would see the sky again. But not everyone believed it. A few of the older survivors whispered that it could be a Krell trick, a false message meant to break their minds. After all, who were these humans? Why had no one ever heard of them before? Elder Soren didn't know, but something in the voice he heard made him believe. It carried strength, but also compassion, something the Krell never had. The next few days passed slowly. The Archon kept watch, waiting for any sign of these mysterious humans. The skies above remained filled with Krell ships. No new lights appeared. But the survivors refused to lose faith. Even when rations ran out and sickness spread in the tunnels, they whispered to one another. They said they're coming. Far away, beyond the reach of Union space, the human fleet was already moving. The Terran ships cut through the darkness of space with engines burning bright. They weren't part of the Galactic Union. They didn't care for its politics or delays. Humanity had grown used to facing danger alone. They came from a world that tried to kill them every day. Storms, predators, volcanoes, and hunger. But they had survived. And when they heard the voice of a dying planet begging for help, they didn't hesitate. On Archon, Elder Soren kept his faith alive by recording messages to these humans. "We are still here," he would say into the transmitter each morning. "The Krell still control the skies. But we are alive. We are waiting." He didn't know if his words were reaching anyone, but speaking them gave him strength. Then one night, something changed. The Krell commanders detected strange energy signatures near the edge of the system. They thought it was a sensor glitch. But a few hours later, their long-range scans picked up hundreds of unidentified contacts entering from hyperspace. They were fast, organized, and heading straight for Arkan. The Krell scrambled their fleets, confused and unprepared. The sky over the burning planet began to flicker with strange moving lights. Down below in the underground tunnels, the survivors felt the ground tremble. A low rumble spread through the rock, growing stronger by the second. Some thought it was another attack. But then a child pointed upward and shouted, "Look!" Through a crack in the ceiling, they saw a bright streak of light cutting across the sky. Then another and another. They weren't bombardments. They were ships entering the atmosphere. Elder Soren fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "They came," he whispered. "By the stars, they came." The people rushed to the surface shelters despite the danger. Above them, the Krell warships opened fire on the new arrivals, filling the heavens with explosions. But the strange ships, the Terran ships, didn't retreat. They moved like predators, swift and precise, answering every shot with devastating fire. For the first time since the war began, the Krell were losing control of the skies. Back in the main bunker, the old transmitter came alive one final time. The same deep voice echoed through every speaker. "This is the Terran fleet. We have arrived. Hold your positions." "You are not alone," the survivors screamed with joy. The noise of hope filled the tunnels louder than any battle above. After so many days of fear, silence, and despair, help had finally come. Not from the allies who had promised protection, but from strangers who had no reason to fight for them. The Arkan didn't know yet who these humans were, or what they were capable of. They didn't know that the galaxy would soon whisper their name in awe and fear. All they knew was that when everyone else had turned away, someone had listened. Someone had answered their call, and as the night sky of Arkan burned again, it no longer looked like the fire of destruction. It looked like the light of salvation arriving from the stars. The morning sky over Arkan was covered with smoke and the ashes of destruction. For weeks, the survivors had seen nothing but Krell ships floating like shadows, their lights flashing across the burning cities. But on this day, something was different. The ground trembled in a way no one had felt before. The Krell soldiers looked up nervously at the heavens, their scanners beeping with unknown readings. The commanders shouted orders, but the confusion was spreading fast through their ranks. In orbit, strange metallic objects had appeared, hundreds of them, moving in perfect formation. They were not Krell ships, and they were not from the Galactic Union. They were something entirely new. The Krell fleet opened fire immediately, beams of plasma lighting up the upper atmosphere. But the unknown ships didn't retreat. They responded with a strike so fast and so precise that the Krell's main battleship was torn apart in seconds. The explosion painted the sky in fire. From the surface, the Arkan survivors saw the red clouds flash white and gold, followed by the echoing roar of thunder that shook the mountains. Elder Soren and the others watched from the tunnels, speechless. "Who are they?" someone whispered. Soren didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the lights in the sky. Deep in his heart, he already knew. The humans had arrived. As the Krell fleet tried to reorganize, the Terran ships descended in perfect coordination. They were built for war, angular, gray, and covered in battle scars. They didn't glide smoothly like Union vessels. They looked raw and alive like beasts made of steel. Each one had symbols painted on its side, names written in a language unknown to the Arkan. One read Iron Resolve, another Valkyrie, and another St. George. From these ships, swarms of smaller crafts burst out, dropships diving through the atmosphere at impossible speeds. The Krell tried to shoot them down, but the humans flew like they were born for chaos. Their ships twisted, rolled, and dodged through explosions as if guided by instinct. When the first Terran dropship landed, the ground cracked beneath its weight. The doors opened with a hiss, and through the smoke came figures in heavy armor, taller than the Arkan and carrying strange weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Their helmets shone with blue lights, and every step they took echoed with power. The air around them smelled of metal and ozone. The first Krell patrol that saw them tried to attack. The humans didn't hesitate. They moved fast, too fast for the Krell to react, and in moments the invaders were gone. The survivors hiding nearby could only watch in awe. These were not diplomats. These were warriors. The humans spread across the battlefield like a storm. They worked in perfect teams, covering each other, communicating through strange coded words. When a soldier fell, another took their place instantly, They fought with purpose, not cruelty. Every movement had meaning. The Krell, used to facing weaker enemies, were suddenly terrified. Their weapons, which had destroyed entire planets, were useless against these new fighters. Human armor absorbed hits that would have vaporized others. They didn't stop even when wounded. It was as if pain didn't slow them down, only made them stronger. High above, the Terran fleet continued the attack from orbit. Their missiles were not plasma or energy-based. They were kinetic, using pure speed and gravity. The Krell didn't even understand what hit them. Huge metal rods dropped from orbit at incredible velocity, crashing through warships like knives through glass. In less than an hour, half the Krell fleet was gone. The rest tried to retreat, but the humans were already blocking every escape route. They hunted with precision, no emotion in their voices, only calm focus. On the ground, Elder Soren finally stepped out of the tunnels, surrounded by a few brave survivors. The air was hot and heavy, filled with the smell of burning metal. He looked up and saw human aircraft flying overhead, dropping supplies instead of bombs. Food, water, and medical kits fell gently through the smoke, attached to parachutes marked with a symbol of a blue planet. Earth. The Archon wept openly. For the first time in months, something fell from the sky that wasn't meant to destroy them. A group of humans soon arrived at the bunker entrance. One of them, a tall figure with a scar running down his helmet, knelt in front of the Archon. When he spoke, his voice was calm but powerful. "We're here to help," he said. "You're safe now." The Archon stared at him in disbelief. The humans looked nothing like them. Their eyes were sharp, their movements quick, their presence almost frightening. Yet there was kindness in their voices, a warmth that felt real. Elder Soren tried to speak, but only managed a broken whisper. "You came. You truly came." The human soldier nodded and touched his shoulder gently. "We don't leave people behind," he said simply. The battle raged for hours across the surface. The Krell fought fiercely, but they were used to fighting the weak, not the strong. The humans didn't fight like any army the galaxy had seen before. They didn't hide behind shields or wait for orders from faraway generals. They adapted instantly, changing tactics every few minutes. When one group was pinned down, another flanked the enemy from the side. They moved through fire, through radiation zones, through collapsing buildings, as if none of it could stop them. One human squad found a group of Archon children trapped under debris. Without hesitation, the soldiers lifted the wreckage with their bare hands and carried the children out. One soldier removed his helmet, revealing a tired, dirt-covered face, young but determined. He smiled at the crying children and handed them his water supply. "Drink," he said softly. "You're safe now." The Archon girl who took the bottle looked at him with wide eyes, whispering, "Are you angels?" The soldier chuckled, shaking his head. "No," he said. "We're just from Earth." By nightfall, the Krell forces began to fall apart. Their commanders screamed orders that no one followed. Their ships in orbit were being torn apart one after another. The humans were relentless. They fought with the fury of those who had known pain and lost themselves. They didn't just want to win. They wanted to make sure no one else would ever suffer like the Archon did. In the capital city, where once stood the great tower of Archon art and learning, the final battle took place. The Krell commander, a massive creature covered in armor, faced a group of human marines in the ruins. "You think you can stop us?" The creature roared. "We have conquered 100 worlds." The lead human stepped forward slowly, lowering his rifle. "Then this is the one you lose," he said, and fired. The Krell commander fell, its armor shattered. The city, once full of screams, went silent. Above the planet, the Terran flagship Valkyrie sent one final transmission across the system. "Archon is secure. The Krell have been defeated. All survivors, report for medical aid and evacuation." Those words echoed through the radios, reaching every bunker and every frightened heart hiding below ground. The survivors screamed and cried, hugging each other as tears of relief ran down their faces. They had been saved. Not by their allies. Not by the Union. But by strangers who came from a world so dangerous that even the galaxy feared them. When the sun rose the next day, it shone on a changed world. Human engineers were already rebuilding damaged structures, setting up clean water systems and organizing food distribution. They treated the wounded Archon with care, using advanced medical tools and simple kindness. Not once did they ask for payment, territory, or power. They just worked. To them, saving lives was enough. Elder Soren watched as a group of children followed a human soldier, laughing again for the first time in months. He turned his eyes to the sky, where human ships still floated like guardians above the planet. Deathworlders, the Union used to call them, creatures from a violent planet that should have never survived. But now as Soren watched them bring life back to his world, he whispered softly, "Perhaps the galaxy was wrong about you." And far above, in the Terran command ship, Admiral Hayes looked down at the recovering planet and said quietly to his crew, "Let this be known. We don't fight for glory. We fight for those who can't." The humans had arrived like a storm and left behind peace. The Archon would never forget that day. The day the sky opened not with destruction but with hope. The day the Deathworlders came. The war for Archon did not end quickly. Even after the main Krell forces were destroyed, smaller groups of them were still hiding in the ruins, spreading chaos and terror. The humans did not rest. They moved through every ruined city, every broken tunnel, and every mountain pass to find and end the threat completely. For the Archon, watching them fight was like seeing legends come to life. These strange warriors from a deadly planet didn't behave like conquerors, and they behaved like protectors. They fought not for reward or territory, but to keep their promise. When they said, "We don't leave people behind," they meant it. In the early days after the main battle, the sky of Archon was filled with fire and thunder again. But this time, it was the humans bringing justice. The Terran fleet began a new operation, hunting the last Krell ships that had escaped into orbit. Their ships were precise, moving like hunters who knew their prey's every weakness. From above, they dropped energy nets that trapped fleeing enemy craft, then destroyed them with kinetic strikes. Every explosion that lit the sky brought cheers from the survivors below. For the first time in months, those flashes of light meant safety, not fear. On the ground, human soldiers walked among the broken streets, scanning for survivors. They carried strange devices that could detect life signs through rubble. Whenever they found someone trapped, they didn't hesitate. They dug with their hands if they had to, ignoring fire, smoke, and exhaustion. One soldier, covered in ash and blood, pulled out a crying child from under a fallen wall. The child looked terrified, but the human smiled, offering him a drink from his water tube. "You're safe now," he said softly. The child stared at him in silence before whispering, "Are you from the stars?" The soldier just nodded and said, "Yes, kid, from a faraway one called Earth." The humans didn't stop for anything. They fought for the living, not for power. Their commanders led from the front, not from distant control rooms. Admiral Hayes himself came down to the surface to see the situation. He wore no grand armor, just a plain black uniform with dust on his boots. When Elder Soren met him, he was surprised by how calm and human the man seemed. "You came for us," Soren said, his old voice trembling. Hayes nodded. "We heard you," he said. That was enough. The humans began to rebuild what the Krell had destroyed. They set up mobile hospitals, repaired power lines, and created safe zones. Their doctors worked tirelessly, using strange machines to heal wounds the Archon thought were fatal. The human medics didn't treat them as aliens. They treated them as people. One Archon nurse watched in wonder as a human doctor used his own blood in an emergency transfusion to save an injured Archon boy. "Your blood is not the same," she said fearfully. The doctor smiled faintly. "Close enough," he replied, and kept working. The boy lived. At night, the soldiers gathered around small fires, sharing food with the survivors. They laughed, told stories about Earth, and listened to the Archon describe their once beautiful cities. Despite the destruction, the humans seemed at peace even in the ruins. One young Archon artist, fascinated by them, asked a soldier, "Your world must be very cruel for you to be so strong." The soldier looked up at the stars and said, "Cruel, yes, but it taught us to protect what matters." The Krell tried to strike back once more. A hidden warship emerged from the dark side of the planet, attacking the human bases with powerful plasma cannons. For a moment, the sky glowed with deadly energy again, but the humans didn't panic. They launched their response instantly. Fighters raced through the air, locking onto the Krell ship's weak points. Within minutes, the massive vessel exploded in a silent burst of light. The humans didn't cheer. They simply moved on, continuing their work. To them, victory was not something to celebrate. It was something to finish. As the days passed, the Archon began to see the true nature of these Deathworlders. They were fierce in battle but gentle in peace. They spoke simply, worked hard, and shared whatever they had. The Archon who once feared them now looked at them with admiration. When children approached, the soldiers knelt down and smiled. When elders spoke, they listened with respect. And when the wounded cried, they comforted them. These were not monsters. They were something greater, survivors who had learned empathy through pain. One day, while inspecting the ruins, Admiral Hayes found a broken statue of an Archon poet. He looked at it silently for a long time. Elder Soren, who stood beside him, said quietly, "That man once wrote that beauty can survive even in ashes." Hayes smiled a little. "Then he understood life on Earth better than most humans do," he said. Together they decided that the humans would help rebuild not just the buildings, but the soul of Archon, its art, its hope, and its future. The news of what had happened spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other planets listened in disbelief when they heard that the humans had destroyed an entire Krell fleet in just a few days. The Galactic Union, embarrassed and afraid, tried to take credit for the rescue, but everyone knew the truth. The humans had done what the mighty Union would not. In secret halls, Union diplomats whispered that the Deathworlders were dangerous, unpredictable, too wild to be trusted. But in the hearts of the people across the stars, a new feeling grew: respect. Meanwhile, on Archon, life slowly began to return. Gardens were replanted, clean water flowed again, and the children started playing in the open. The sky still carried the scars of war, but now it also carried the light of hope. Human ships floated silently in orbit, guarding the planet. Whenever a Krell signal appeared, they destroyed it before it even came close. The Archon slept peacefully for the first time in months, knowing someone was watching over them. One night, a small ceremony was held in the central plaza, the same place where the first Krell attack had begun. The Archon gathered there to honor their fallen and thank their saviors. Admiral Hayes stood quietly beside Elder Soren as the people sang their ancient song of remembrance. When the music ended, Soren turned to the crowd and said, "We called for help and our allies stayed silent. But when the darkness surrounded us, voices from a faraway world answered. They came not for power, not for gain, but for justice." His words echoed through the air, soft but powerful. Then he looked at Hayes and said, "The galaxy may call them Deathworlders, but to us they are life-bringers." Hayes didn't respond with a speech. He simply bowed his head. The humans never saw themselves as heroes, only as soldiers doing what was right. But to the Archon they were more than that. They were proof that courage and kindness could exist even in the harshest hearts. In the following weeks, the humans helped create a defense system for Archon so that it would never fall again. They trained the Archon soldiers, teaching them not just how to fight, but how to protect without cruelty. The new generation of Archon looked up to their human teachers with awe. Some even painted murals of human ships surrounded by glowing stars, symbols of hope and strength. Despite their victory, the humans didn't stay forever. Their mission was never about control. When the planet was safe, they prepared to leave. Before their departure, Admiral Hayes met Elder Soren one last time. They stood together on a rebuilt tower, overlooking the shining city that was once nothing but ruins. "Will we ever see you again?" Soren asked quietly. Hayes smiled faintly. "If you ever need us," he said, "you know how to call." As the human fleet began to rise into the sky, the Archon gathered to watch. The ships glowed like stars, their engines lighting up the night. Children waved, soldiers saluted, and the old wept openly. The humans had arrived as strangers, but were leaving as legends. When the last ship disappeared into the stars, Elder Soren whispered to himself, "They came from a world that should have destroyed them, yet they saved ours." The galaxy would never be the same again. The story of the Deathworlders' wrath and compassion spread everywhere, from the cold moons of the Outer Rim to the heart of the Union itself. It became a tale told in whispers and songs, how the humans fought like demons but healed like angels, how they brought fire to the cruel and light to the broken. For the Archon, every dawn now carried a silent prayer, not to their old allies, but to the warriors from Earth who had taught them that strength without mercy was evil. But mercy backed by strength could change worlds. And in the endless sea of stars, somewhere beyond their reach, humanity continued its journey, ready to answer the next cry for help, no matter who sent it. Months passed since the humans left Archon, but their presence was still felt everywhere. The people spoke about them every day. The soldiers who stood against death itself, the doctors who saved the dying, the engineers who rebuilt their homes. Life had returned to the planet, yet something deep within the hearts of the Arkan people had changed forever. They were no longer the same species who had once depended on the protection of the Galactic Union. They had learned strength from the Deathworlders. They had learned courage, and more than anything, they had learned that true allies are not those who sit in safety, but those who come when all hope is gone. Elder Soren often walked through the new capital, rebuilt from ashes. Tall towers now stood where rubble had once been. The air smelled of fresh metal and green fields instead of smoke and blood. Yet every stone, every streetlight reminded him of the humans, of the black-armored soldiers who had walked through fire without fear, of Admiral Hayes's calm eyes when he said, "We don't abandon anyone." Soren knew those words would never fade from his memory. He had them engraved on a plaque in the city's main plaza, so every Arkan child would grow up reading them. The Galactic Union soon sent envoys to Arkan. They arrived in shining silver ships, carrying gifts, speeches, and apologies. But the people no longer looked at them with admiration. The Union had abandoned them when they needed help the most. Now when they came with smiles, it felt hollow. Elder Soren received them politely but coldly. When one ambassador said, "We are glad your world survived," Soren simply replied, "We survived because of those you feared." The envoys shifted uncomfortably. Everyone in the galaxy now whispered about the Deathworlders, humans who came from a planet so dangerous that even the air could kill the weak, a place where life itself was a constant battle. To many, Earth was a myth before the War of Arkan. Now it was a name spoken with both awe and fear. The Union government secretly debated what to do about humanity. Some wanted to invite them into the Union. Others wanted to watch them carefully, afraid they might one day turn their power against others. But none could deny the truth. The humans had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Back on Arkan, the people began preparing for a future of independence. With the technology humans had shared, they built new defense grids and energy systems. They trained their soldiers using the methods the Deathworlders had taught. It wasn't just about weapons, it was about spirit. The humans had shown them that strength didn't come from advanced machines but from determination. The Arkan military's new motto became "Stand, even when alone," a phrase taken directly from a human commander's words during the battle. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, Elder Soren sat with a young Arkan named Lyra, one of the many children rescued by the humans. She had grown stronger, now working as an engineer in the new city. She often spoke of her dreams to build ships that could travel to other worlds. "I want to see Earth someday," she said softly, looking at the stars. Soren smiled. "Why?" he asked. She answered, "Because I want to thank them. And because if they could survive their world, maybe I can survive anything." Her words filled Soren's heart with pride. That was the gift the humans had given them, not just survival but belief. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the Terran fleet was not idle. They continued their missions, answering distress calls from forgotten worlds, fighting back against slavers and tyrants. The name Deathworlders began to carry a new meaning. It no longer stood for destruction, but for those who came when others would not. On some planets, people even began painting the Terran symbol, a blue circle with a single white star, on their doors as a sign of hope. When pirates or raiders saw that mark, they often fled. Nobody wanted to face the wrath of the Deathworlders. One day, the peace of Arkan was disturbed again. A deep space probe detected a massive fleet moving near their borders. The markings were Krell, but different, larger, more organized. The surviving Krell had gathered under a new leader, seeking revenge for their defeat. Fear spread quickly among the Arkan. They were still rebuilding. They couldn't face another war. Panic rose in the streets, and for the first time since the humans left, despair returned. But Elder Soren stood firm. "Send the signal," he said quietly, across the galaxy. The same distress beacon that once cried into silence now reached a new destination: Earth. In a Terran command center, the old message code flashed red. A young officer looked at the screen and turned to Admiral Hayes. "Sir," he said, "it's Arkan. They're calling for us." Hayes didn't hesitate. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. They stood alone long enough. Within hours, hundreds of Terran ships left orbit, forming a dark swarm against the stars. Their engines burned bright as they cut through the void, heading straight for Arkin. The galaxy watched again, stunned. The humans weren't protecting their own world this time. They were defending another. When the Terran fleet arrived, the Krell Armada was already attacking Arkin's defense lines. The sky was filled with fire again, but this time the Arkin were not helpless. Their new defense systems, built with human technology, held strong, buying precious minutes. Then from hyperspace the Deathworlders appeared. The moment they entered the battlefield, everything changed. The humans didn't just fight. They dominated. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, their weapons cutting through enemy shields like paper. Within minutes, the Krell fleet began to fall apart. From the surface, the Arkin watched the sky light up with explosions. Children pointed upward, shouting with joy. They came back. The humans came back. Lyra stood among them, tears in her eyes. She had believed, and they had answered. Down below, human dropships landed again, bringing soldiers and aid. Admiral Hayes personally met Elder Soren once more. This time, Soren greeted him not as a savior, but as an equal. "We called," he said with a small smile, "and you came." Hayes chuckled softly. "We said we would." The battle didn't last long. When the Krell realized they were facing the same warriors who had destroyed their fleets before, their morale broke. Some tried to flee, but the humans didn't let them escape this time. They ended the threat completely. When it was over, the stars were silent again. The Arkin and humans stood side by side amid the ruins of the Krell warships. For the first time, both species shared not fear but pride. They had fought together and they had won together. Elder Soren looked at Hayes and said, "Perhaps the galaxy will finally understand what it means to be your ally." Hayes looked around at the smiling faces of Arkin civilians and replied, "Maybe, or maybe they'll just keep watching. Either way, we'll keep doing what's right." In the days that followed, humans and Arkin began building something new. Not a simple alliance, but a brotherhood. Scientists from both worlds exchanged knowledge, artists painted murals of their unity, and children grew up learning about Earth not as a terrifying death world, but as the cradle of courage. The Galactic Union eventually extended an invitation for both Earth and Arkin to join as partners. This time the humans didn't ignore it, but they made one thing clear. They would never obey blind authority. They would act by conscience, not command. And so, for the first time, the Union had to accept that true power didn't come from fear, but from the will to protect others. Years later, when Elder Soren grew old and his time came to an end, Lyra stood beside him. He looked out the window at the stars and smiled faintly. "Do you see that?" he whispered, pointing at a small blue spark among the stars. "That's Earth, the world that saved us." Lyra nodded, her eyes full of tears. "And we'll save others," she said softly. Soren smiled, closing his eyes. "Then the Deathworlders taught us well." After his passing, the main city of Arkin was renamed Hayes' Promise, to honor the man who kept his word. Statues of both humans and Arkin stood together in its central plaza, symbolizing their unbreakable bond. Children played beneath them, their laughter echoing in the air once filled with screams. And somewhere in the deep darkness of space, the Terran fleet continued its endless journey. They didn't fight for glory or recognition. They fought for something purer, the belief that no cry for help should ever go unanswered. To the galaxy, they remained both mystery and myth, the Deathworlders who came when no one else dared. Their allies never came. But the Deathworlders did, and that changed the galaxy forever.